Have you ever felt a pain so deep it feels like it's settled right into your bones? I'm not talking about a physical ache, but an emotional wound that echoes long after the initial cut. Heartbreak is a universal language, one that many of us unfortunately learn to speak through bitter experience. It changes you. It rewires how you see the world, how you see others, and most importantly, how you see yourself. When someone you trust, someone you've built a life with, shatters that trust, the fallout is immense. It's a lonely, confusing place to be, and if you're there right now, I want you to know you are not alone in that feeling. It's a journey no one asks for, but one many of us have to walk. The initial shock of betrayal can feel like a tidal wave. It knocks the air from your lungs and leaves you gasping, disoriented in a world that suddenly looks unfamiliar. The person you thought you knew, the future you thought you had, it all dissolves into a fog of confusion and pain. People will tell you to get over it or that time heals all wounds, but that's easy to say when you're not the one picking up the pieces. Healing isn't a passive process. It's an active, often grueling fight. It requires you to confront ugly truths and sit with uncomfortable emotions. It's about more than just moving on. It's about figuring out how to rebuild your own foundation when the ground has been ripped out from under you. This isn't just a story about a relationship ending. This is a story about the quiet, insidious creep of doubt and the slow erosion of self-worth that happens when you're being deceived. It's about the emotional manipulation that can make you question your own sanity long before you ever find concrete proof of infidelity. You start to feel like you're the problem, that you're too sensitive, too jealous, or too demanding. This kind of manipulation is a poison that seeps into your soul, making the eventual discovery of the truth that much more devastating. It's a 1-2 punch of a broken heart and a shattered sense of self. So let's talk about it. Let's get real about what it feels like to have your world turned upside down. We're not going to sugarcoat it or offer simple platitudes. We're going to walk through the darkness because sometimes the only way out is through. If you've ever had your heart broken, if you've ever been lied to by someone you loved, then you know the journey I'm talking about. It's a painful one, but it's also a journey that can lead to profound self-discovery and strength you never knew you possessed. Let's begin at the place where the light first started to dim, where the first seeds of doubt were planted. Every great love story seems to begin in the sunshine, doesn't it? Ours was no different. The beginning was bright, full of laughter and a sense of effortlessness that felt like destiny. We connected on a level that seemed rare and profound. It felt like we were a team, two people against the world, building a future brick by brick. There was a comfort and a certainty in it that became the bedrock of my daily life. I believed in us. I believed in the promises we made and the future we painted together in our conversations. It was a beautiful, vibrant picture, and for a long time, I had no reason to believe it would ever fade. But then, subtly at first, things began to change. It wasn't a sudden storm, but a slow, creeping fog that rolled in and dulled the colors. The easy laughter became less frequent, replaced by a quiet tension that hung in the air. Conversations that once flowed for hours became stunted and superficial. I found myself trying harder, pushing for the connection we once had, only to be met with a frustrating distance. It felt like I was reaching for something that was constantly moving just out of my grasp. I told myself it was just a phase, that all long-term relationships have their ebbs and flows. I made excuses for him, for us. That feeling of wrongness, it's a hard thing to pinpoint. It's a gut instinct, a low hum of anxiety that you try to ignore. You start to feel a little bit crazy, questioning your own perceptions. Am I being too needy? Am I imagining things? He would reassure me that everything was fine, that I was just overthinking. And for a while I would believe him, because believing him was easier than confronting the terrifying alternative. The alternative was that the foundation I had built my life on was cracking, and I wasn't ready to face that. So I pushed the doubts down, hoping they would disappear on their own. The truth is, when a relationship starts to decay from the inside, you feel it in your spirit long before you can prove it with facts. It's the emotional equivalent of knowing a storm is coming because the air pressure drops. You can't see the rain yet, but you can feel the change. That's where I was, living under a sky that looked clear, but with a growing sense of atmospheric dread. The sunshine was gone, replaced by an overcast sky that threatened a storm I couldn't yet see. The comfortable silence we once shared now felt heavy, loaded with unspoken words and secrets I was not yet privy to. The Bible talks about the little foxes that spoil the vine, the small, seemingly insignificant things that can ruin something beautiful. In my relationship, these little foxes started appearing one by one, and each one nibbled away at my sense of security. The first was the change in language. The affectionate nicknames and terms of endearment we used for each other started to disappear from his vocabulary. "I love you" began to feel like a reflexive response rather than a heartfelt declaration. He started talking more about my future instead of our future. These were tiny shifts, easy to dismiss on their own, but together they started to paint a troubling picture. Then came the suspicious absences and the vague explanations. Nights out with the guys became more frequent, but the stories afterward were always hazy and inconsistent. He would be late coming home from work, blaming traffic or a last-minute meeting, but there was a defensiveness in his tone that hadn't been there before. His phone, which once lay casually on the coffee table, was now always in his pocket or placed face down. He developed a sudden and intense need for privacy that felt less about personal space and more about hiding something. When I'd ask simple questions, his answers were either overly detailed or frustratingly sparse, a classic sign that someone is constructing a lie. His behavior grew stranger in other ways too. There was a sudden interest in his appearance, new clothes and a new cologne. While self-improvement is great, this felt different. It felt like he was curating an image for someone else. He also became hypercritical of me. Little things that he used to find charming were now sources of irritation. It was as if he was building a case against me, against us, perhaps to justify his actions to himself. This constant, low-grade criticism chipped away at my confidence, making me feel like I was the one failing in the relationship, that I was no longer good enough for him. These signs are red flags, and I want you to hear me on this. They are not just your imagination running wild. When someone's patterns change dramatically without a logical or shared explanation, you are not crazy for noticing. You're not insecure for questioning it. You are perceptive. Your gut is telling you that the person you know is behaving like a stranger because, in a way, they are. They are living a life you are not a part of, and these subtle changes are the cracks in the facade. I was seeing all the cracks, but I was still desperately trying to convince myself the wall was solid. There's always a moment of discovery, isn't there? A single gut-wrenching instant where all the little doubts and anxieties crystallize into a horrific, undeniable truth. For me, that moment came late on a Tuesday night in 2025. He was asleep, and his phone, for the first time in months, was not in his pocket. It was on the nightstand, and it buzzed with a new message. I don't know what possessed me to look. Maybe it was months of suppressed suspicion finally boiling over. Maybe it was just a gut feeling that screamed at me, "Now!" I picked it up, my hands trembling, and my world fell apart. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize and a message that made the air leave my lungs. It was a simple, "Good night, I miss you already," followed by a heart emoji. It wasn't the message itself, but the casual intimacy of it that hit me like a physical blow. My heart started pounding in my ears as I unlocked the phone. His password, ironically, was our anniversary date. I opened the message thread and began to scroll. It was like watching a movie of a secret life he had been living, a life that ran parallel to ours, a life that I was not only excluded from, but was the subject of ridicule in. The messages went back for months. There were pictures, inside jokes, and plans for their future. They talked about me, he complained about me, twisted my words, and painted me as a burden he couldn't wait to be free of. He was performing for her, creating a narrative where he was the trapped, misunderstood victim and I was the clueless, difficult partner. Every "I'm working late and I'm out with friends" was a lie, meticulously documented in this secret conversation. The person I saw in those texts was a complete stranger, cruel, calculating, and utterly devoid of the love and respect I thought we shared. The shock was so profound it was almost paralyzing. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, the phone feeling heavy as a brick in my hand, just staring at him, sleeping peacefully. How could he lie there, in our bed, after sending messages like that? How could he kiss me goodnight and then text her? The betrayal wasn't just the physical cheating, it was the depth of the emotional deception. He hadn't just stepped out of the relationship, he had actively dismantled my reality, my trust, and my sense of who we were. In that moment, the man I loved ceased to exist, replaced by the monster on the screen. The most painful part of the discovery wasn't just the cheating itself. That was a dagger to the heart, to be sure. But the cruelest cut, the one that has left the deepest and most jagged scar, was reading his words about me. To see the person you love, the person you have been vulnerable with, describe you with such contempt and mockery to someone else, is a unique and soul-crushing kind of pain. He took my insecurities, the very things I had trusted him with, and used them as punchlines in his conversations with her. My anxieties were framed as him being stuck with a crazy person. My efforts to connect were described as annoying and clingy. I learned that for months, while I was trying to fix what I thought was a struggling relationship, he was actively sabotaging it. He was creating problems, picking fights, and then using those manufactured conflicts as evidence to his new partner that our relationship was unsalvageable. I was a character in a play he was directing, and I didn't even know I was on stage. The feeling of being used is profound. I wasn't a partner, I was an obstacle. I was a placeholder he kept around for convenience until his new plan was ready. My love, my care, my energy, it was all just a resource he was draining while he invested his real emotions elsewhere. The discovery revealed a double betrayal. It wasn't just that he was with someone else. It was that the person he was with was someone I knew. A supposed friend. This added a layer of humiliation and violation that is hard to describe. I replayed every interaction, every conversation, every time we had all been in the same room together. I saw the shared glances, the inside jokes that went over my head, the subtle signs of their secret alliance. They had both looked me in the eye and lied, day after day. The conspiracy of it all made me feel incredibly small and foolish, as if everyone was in on a joke at my expense. This is the part that people who haven't been through it don't always understand. The breakup is painful, but the obliteration of your own history is worse. You are forced to look back at every happy memory, every anniversary, every vacation, and question its authenticity. Was he thinking of her then? Was that smile genuine? Was any of it real? This retroactive poisoning of your past is a devastating form of emotional violence. It steals not only your future but also the reality of your past, leaving you feeling like your entire life with that person was built on a foundation of lies. After the dust settled from the initial explosion, I was left standing in the rubble of my life. The immediate aftermath was a blur of raw, unfiltered emotion. There was the anger, a white-hot rage that made me want to scream and break things. Then there was the sadness, a deep, cavernous grief for the man I thought I knew and the future I thought we would have. But underneath it all was a more insidious feeling, shame. I felt ashamed for not seeing it sooner, for being so easily fooled, for loving someone who was capable of such cruelty. My self-esteem was at an all-time low. This experience fundamentally changed how I view trust. Before, I was someone who gave my trust freely and believed in the inherent goodness of the person I loved. Now, a wall of skepticism stands where that open door used to be. In the relationships that have followed, I find myself looking for signs, analyzing words, and bracing for impact. A change plan or a vague answer can send a jolt of panic through me, triggering the memory of past betrayals. It's an exhausting way to live, constantly on guard, unable to fully relax into the comfort of a new connection. Trusting someone else feels like a monumental risk, but the deeper issue is that I stopped trusting my own judgment. The betrayal made me question my own worth in a profound way. If the person who knew me most intimately could discard me so easily, what did that say about me? I internalized his criticisms, the ones I read in those awful messages. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I wasn't enough. These toxic thoughts became a constant looping soundtrack in my mind. Rebuilding my self-esteem has been a slow, deliberate process. It has meant consciously challenging those negative thoughts and reminding myself that his actions were a reflection of his character, not my worth. It's a daily practice of self-compassion, of learning to be my own advocate. The journey of healing is not linear. There are good days when I feel strong and whole, and there are bad days when a song or a memory can send me spiraling back into the pain. I have had to learn to be patient with myself, to allow myself to feel the grief without letting it consume me. It has involved therapy, long talks with true friends, and a lot of time spent alone, getting to know myself again outside the context of that relationship. Rebuilding from ruin means finding the pieces of yourself that are still intact and starting from there, one small, unsteady brick at a time. So, where does that leave a person, standing in the aftermath, holding the shattered pieces of their heart and their self-worth? The biggest question that haunted me for the longest time was, how will I ever love again? But I've come to realize that may be the wrong question. The more important and more difficult question is, how will I ever trust myself again? How do you trust your own judgment when it led you to invest so deeply in someone who was so deceptive? How do you trust your own instincts when they were so easily silenced by gaslighting and manipulation? That, I believe, is the real work of healing from this kind of betrayal. The truth is, the experience left me with a deep-seated fear of being vulnerable. Love requires vulnerability. It requires you to lay down your armor and trust that the other person won't use it against you. My armor is now welded shut, and the idea of lowering it for someone new is terrifying. I find myself second-guessing my own feelings. If I feel a spark with someone, a little voice in my head whispers, "Is this real? Or are you just being fooled again?" It's a constant battle between the desire for connection and the instinct for self-preservation, an instinct that was born from intense pain. I want you to think about this in your own life. If you've been hurt like this, have you forgiven yourself? Have you forgiven yourself for not knowing what you couldn't have known? We often blame ourselves for missing the red flags, but a person committed to deceiving you will go to great lengths to hide them. You are not weak for believing in someone. You are not stupid for trusting. You were operating from a place of love, while they were operating from a place of selfishness and deceit. The fault does not lie with your open heart, it lies with their closed one. Ultimately, I don't have all the answers. I am still on this journey, still learning and still healing. But I have come to believe that the goal isn't to become the person I was before. That person is gone. The goal is to integrate this experience into who I am now, to let the scars remind me of my own resilience. Perhaps true healing isn't about finding someone else to prove that love can be safe. Perhaps it's about proving to yourself that you are safe with you. Can you learn to trust your own instincts again? Can you build a sense of self-worth so strong that no one person can ever demolish it again? That is the real question, and finding the answer is a journey worth taking.